The night my father shattered me began with applause. His investors toasted his visionary leadership. Cameras flashing across the marble ballroom like lightning. I stood beside him. The daughter he once called his greatest creation now treated like background decor. When I lifted my glass and said, "To you, Dad, the man who built everything," he turned toward me with that cold, perfect smile. "Don't embarrass me, Stella," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'd rather raise a dog than raise you." Laughter. Real cruel laughter. Then he added, "You'll never be good enough to run my company." The sound cut deeper than glass. I smiled anyway, pretending it didn't hurt, but something inside me shifted a small deliberate click, like a lock opening. Because that night, my father didn't just humiliate me. He handed me the reason to destroy his empire. I'd spent weeks helping my father prepare for that night, the annual Beaumont Investors Gala. Every flower, every seating chart, every word of his speech had passed through my hands. It was supposed to be my moment, too. My first appearance as the company's future COO. But standing there, surrounded by men twice my age and women pretending to care, I realized I was nothing more than an accessory. My father, Charles Beaumont, commanded the room like a king. His laugh boomed. His hand rested on the shoulder of whichever investor he needed that quarter. And when his eyes met mine, I saw irritation, not pride. "Smile, Stella," he hissed under his breath. "You look like a funeral guest." I obeyed. I always did. When dinner ended, I stood, heart pounding, and lifted my glass. "To my father," I began, voice steady, despite the tremor in my chest. "Who built an empire from nothing. You've always been my greatest inspiration." It was genuine until he laughed. Loud, sharp, cruel. "Don't embarrass me," he barked. "I'd rather raise a dog than raise you." The laughter started like a spark, then roared into wildfire. Men in tuxedos slapped each other's backs. Women covered their mouths, whispering, "Did she really think she'd take over Beaumont Industries?" My skin burned. My vision blurred. Still, I forced a smile. Then he leaned closer, voice dripping with venom. "You'll never be good enough to run my company. You don't have the spine or the brains. You're a sentimental little girl pretending to be a leader." That broke something in me. But it also built something new. I remember the silence that followed my reply. I remember the way every glass froze mid-day. I turned toward him and said quietly, "You're right, Dad. I'm nothing like you. I don't lie to investors. I don't hide money offshore. I don't destroy people just to look powerful." The room went dead silent. Even the pianist stopped playing, his face drained of color. "What did you just say?" I smiled wider. "Just a toast, Father." Then I sat down slowly, calmly. While he tried to laugh it off, I saw fear flicker behind his eyes. That was the moment I knew the humiliation wasn't mine anymore. It was his. And before the night was over, I would make sure the entire world saw it, too. The morning after the gala, my face was everywhere. Photos of my father's legendary wit trended on business blogs. Headlines mocked the Beaumont Aries who couldn't take a joke. My phone lit up with texts from people pretending to sympathize. But beneath their pity, I heard laughter, the same cruel echo from last night. My father, meanwhile, was having breakfast with 2 board members, sipping espresso as if nothing had happened. When I entered the dining room, he didn't even glance up from his tablet. "Stella," he said, calm and clipped. "Next time you speak at my events, get my approval first." I stood there, fists tight at my sides. "You humiliated me in front of your investors." He finally looked up, smiling thinly. "Correction," I reminded. "Everyone who's in charge. You should thank me. This will toughen you up." He went back to reading stock reports while I stood frozen. That was when I noticed the folders beside his plate marked private came in accounts confidential. Transfers. He caught me looking. You don't touch my files. I wasn't. Don't. He snapped, voice low. You're not ready to handle the business. You never will be. Something inside me whispered. Watch him. That night, when the mansion was quiet and his study door closed, I slipped into his office. The scent of expensive cigars and old money clung to everything. On his mahogany desk sat a sleek black laptop, the screen still glowing faintly, password protected, of course. But my father had a habit. He reused combinations, birthdays, stock codes, even old racing numbers. I tried, one after another, until on the 7th attempt, the screen unlocked. The folders I found weren't ordinary financial documents. They were maps of deceit, shell companies, offshore accounts, transfers timed perfectly before quarterly reports. Millions hidden under names I didn't recognize. One folder was labeled Project Orion. Inside, fake invoices, fake vendors, and a signature that wasn't his. It was mine. My blood ran cold. He'd forged my name. Every document pointed to one thing. If the fraud was ever exposed, I'd be the one blamed. The realization hit me like a scalpel to the chest. My father hadn't just humiliated me, he'd set me up. I copied everything to a flash drive, heart pounding, deleting my tracks as I went. As I left the study, I paused at the doorway, looking back at his empire, the art, the awards, the photographs of him shaking hands with presidents and billionaires. Raise a dog, her. I whispered. Let's see how loyal your friends are when they find out who you really are. That night, I didn't sleep, I planned. And by dawn, I had one goal: to destroy Charles Beaumont using the very empire he thought I wasn't good enough to inherit. I'd always believed I had to win alone. Growing up, my father called that independent stubbornness. But standing in his study with a flash drive in my pocket, I understood something else. To bring down an empire, you need people who know how empires are built and how to dismantle them. The first person I called was Ava Rivera, a forensic accountant I'd worked with during an internship. Ava was small, unassuming, and terrifyingly good with numbers. We met in a corner booth at a cafe 3 blocks from Bowman Industries. She stirred her coffee like she was considering murder. Show me everything, she said. No preamble. Her eyes skimmed the flash drive like a surgeon inspecting an X-ray. I handed it over and watched her plug it into her laptop. She didn't smile when the spreadsheets unfolded. She only frowned. The way someone frowns at a puzzle that shouldn't be solvable. Shell companies in Panama, nominee directors, transfers. Time to earnings calls, Ava murmured. He's been laundering money through vendor payments, padding contracts, and Stella, look at these dates. She pointed at a column where transfers always occurred 2 days before quarterly close. He's building a cushion for himself and a landfill of bodies for anyone in his way. My throat tightened. I thought of every time my father had given me advice that sounded suspicious, the late-night calls, checking in when he was supposed to be traveling, the invoices that conveniently matched my calendar. The offhand joke about keeping the house clean that in retrospect sounded a lot like threats. Ava looked up. If we take this to federal prosecutors, it'll stick. But you need protection. He'll pivot and pin it on you. He's already forged your signature. I know, I said. I'd seen the signature in his study, my name slanted. And false on documents that would ruin me. I felt my palms go cold. Can you help me build a case that ties him directly to the money? She nodded. I'll trace the money trail, but you'll need legal counsel who knows how to handle high-profile cases without leaking to the press. She tapped a contact on her phone. Diana Brooks. She's worked cases like this before. She'll keep it tight. Diana was everything I feared. And needed sharp, composed, and as immovable as a courthouse column. When I met her in her office, she laid out the timeline like a general planning a campaign. We establish your credibility first, she said. We make it clear you were a whistleblower, not a conspirator. We file for immunity provisional while we gather corroborating evidence, and we coordinate with a federal prosecutor who can move quickly. Coordination was the word of the week. Every move had to be synchronized. Ava mapping the money, Diana drafting immunity language, and me, I had to play my part in public until the moment arrived. I'd still go to board meetings, still smile in glossy magazine photos, still be the beautiful daughter at charity luncheons. The difference was I would not be performing. I'd be positioning. There were risks. My father had lawyers who could bury people alive in paper. He had friends in media and politicians who owed him favors. But he did not expect me to fight with his own tools. Before I left Diana's office, she looked me straight in the eye. You understand. This could destroy more than him, she said. Collateral damage will happen. Are you prepared for that? I thought of the laughter, sharp as broken crystal. I thought of the way investors had cheered when he ruined me. I said. I'm prepared to lose everything that isn't mine already, she nodded. And for the first time since that toast, I felt the weight in my chest shift. We had a plan. We had allies. The next steps were surgical precision. Build the paper trail, secure the witnesses, and choose the night that would make the world watch him fall. By the time I walked back into the river of marble and glass, that was my father's life. The smile I wore was not for his cameras. It was a mask for the storm I was about to unleash. We didn't set off fireworks. No dramatic phone calls at midnight. No leaked emails to tabloids. Revenge that destroys an empire is much less glamorous. It's timing, patience, and 1,000 tiny betrayals assembled into one undeniable truth. Ava worked in the shadows, tracing wire by wire until she found the conduit that mattered. A little-known trust account registered under a shell company, Horizon Meridian, that funneled cash from Beaumont Industries into art purchases, cryptocurrency wallets, and expensive consulting fees that vanished into Cayman entities. The account circulated through a network of nominees. Robert Hayes, our board chair, was surprisingly sloppy. He'd signed a memo one afternoon, and that memo left fingerprints. Diana arranged everything. Legal. Well, need a federal prosecutor who won't cave to influence, she said, sliding a list across her desk. Patterson, he's direct and he hates being played. I met Patterson in a small conference room down the block. He smelled faintly of espresso and moral certainty. He didn't promise miracles. He promised procedure. That was enough. My side needed technical certainty. That's where Ethan Cole came in. My father's longtime IT director who'd quietly despised Charles for years. Ethan owed me nothing. He owed the truth. We met in a parking garage under a diner and he handed me a thumb drive. As if passing a relic. This will show you the back-end logs, he said. The timestamps, the access records, they're sloppy about VPNs. They think their servers are private. They're not. He avoided looking at my face. There was fear there, not for himself, but for what exposing the truth might do to the people he'd once called colleagues. The plan took shape like a surgical procedure. We would present irrefutable paper and digital evidence to Patterson. He would obtain warrants time to a partner meeting at Beaumont Industries, a meeting Charles could not avoid, one where every partner would be present and every document accessible. While the warrants were served, I would make my public move, expose the falsified signatures, the forged documents tying me to fabricated contracts, and reveal the way he used my name as cover. People asked why I wanted the public spectacle. Why not quietly hand it over to authorities, they whispered. Because Charles had learned how to survive private reckonings. He had friends who moved quietly and buried mistakes. He thrived in nuance and grey areas. I needed light that burned so bright there was nowhere left to hide. There was also a personal calculus. If I exposed him quietly, his defenders would have time to spin narratives that I was a resentful daughter, an opportunist. If I exposed him in public, surrounded by the very investors who cheered when he humiliated me. The cognitive dissonance would be too great. They would have to choose. Continue smiling for the man who'd lied to them or turn and face the truth. We rehearsed the sequence 3 times. Ava timed the transaction trails against board minutes. Ethan matched server logs to Charles' travel itineraries. Diana drafted immunity clauses and escape hatches for witnesses. Patterson coordinated with agents who would walk into the partner meeting without warning. At home, my father kept rehearsing his confident speech, oblivious. He would stand at the podium and tell a room of wealthy men about legacy and stewardship, and they would hang on his every word. He would never suspect that when he raised a glass to his own greatness, every glass in the room would shiver with the sound of falling trust. That thought kept me awake at night. The image of him frozen, the empire's light flickering like a candle in a wind. I pictured the faces of the investors, the aides, the wives who'd laughed last week. I pictured their mouths falling open, the masks slipping. When the week of the partner meeting arrived, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The pieces were on the board. The witnesses were ready. The warrants had been prepared. All that remained was to choose which moment would break him and to stand in front of the world and say his name out loud. The partner meeting was in the glass conference room on the 15th floor, sunlit and sterile, the kind of place where men in suits practice looking decisive. Charles paced at the head of the table, speech polished, tie immaculate. He greeted each partner with a practiced pat on the back. The same hand that had raised a glass and compared me to a dog only weeks before. He had no idea the room was wired, that agents in plain clothes had already taken seats in the corner, or that the projector would not be showing the quarterly forecast in 5 minutes, it would be showing his handwriting on forged invoices. I walked in last, the click of my heels sounding too loud. For a second, the room remembered me as the daughter in the glossy family portrait on the floor above. Then Charles saw me and smirked, a look that demanded applause. Saturday, my chest felt like a drum, but my hands were steady. Before we start, I said, and the room turned. I want to address something personal. His smirk sharpened into curiosity. He expected melodrama, not procedure. Diana was on my left with a file folder that looked innocuous enough to be a menu. Ava sat across from me, fingers crossed. Under the table, Ethan's eyes were fixed on Charles. Unreadable. I've brought documentation, I continued, and slid the thumb drive across the table toward Patterson, who rose without showmanship, and connected it to the conference system. The projector flickered, then filled the glass wall with spreadsheets, offshore transfers, and a red highlighted trail that led straight to Horizon Meridian. You don't need to press play, Charles barked. This is a stunt, is it? I asked. Or is it the part where all your friends find out how you've been treating them? I touched the screen and the spreadsheet zoomed to a transaction dated the week of your philanthropic gala. The vendor name matched the invoice, signed my signature. His face moved through color like someone watching a bad magic trick. That's a forgery, he said, voice thin. You planted this. You're trying to ruin me. Ava leaned forward. Look at the audit trails. Charles, server logs show the entries made from your office terminal at 2:12 a.m. the same night you were supposedly in Boston. Ethan verified the VPN fingerprints. You can't move the timestamps. Bradley, our legal counsel, swallowed audibly. Partners were whispering. Someone laughed nervously, then cleared his throat and stopped. The room smelled suddenly of coffee and fear. You're lying, Charles repeated, but his eyes were searching for an audience to rescue him. No one offered one. I played the recording. Next, his voice, unvarnished, instructing a subordinate on how to shift funds before Davidson reviews. I wasn't there as a daughter anymore. I was a witness. The woman who had turned the Beaumont name into evidence. When they brought my father in, he still tried to look untouchable. The suit was tailored, but the confidence was gone. His eyes found mine, That same calculating stare he used to level boardrooms, except now I didn't look away. The prosecutor, Patterson, began with precision. Charles Beaumont is charged with 12 counts of securities fraud, 5 counts of embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. The key witness, his daughter, Stella Beaumont. My name rippled through the room like a spark through dry air. My palms were damp, but my voice didn't tremble. I told them everything. The forged signatures, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the night he humiliated me in front of his investors. When I mentioned that line, "I'd rather raise a dog than raise you," there were gasps. Even the stenographer looked up for a heartbeat. My father smirked as if still trying to perform the old role of the charming tyrant. But each piece of evidence stripped another layer from him. Spreadsheets, call logs, voice recordings. Ava took the stand. Next. Her testimony was pure precision. Digital trails, timestamps, account transfers. Then Ethan followed, explaining server logs and VPN misuse, confirming every number. Diana watched from the bench, silent but steady, the anchor of our chaos. And finally, Patterson played the recording. Charles Beaumont moved the funds before Davidson reviews. Use Stella's vendor ID. No one checks those accounts anyway. The jury didn't move. Neither did I. The courtroom went so quiet I could hear the air conditioner hum when it ended. My father leaned forward. "You ungrateful little girl," he muttered. "Everything you have came from me." I met his gaze. "Then, consider this your return on investment." That broke the spell. The courtroom buzzed half shock, half awe. In the days that followed, his allies flipped one by one. Marcus Leving, Robert Hayes, even my uncle, the man behind Bluebridge Consulting. The house of cards collapsed in perfect symmetry. The sentencing hearing came 3 weeks later. My statement was short, deliberate. "Your Honor, I'm not here to talk about the money my father stole," I said, voice steady. "I'm here to talk about what he taught me. That cruelty can wear a suit, and silence can be obedience. He built an empire out of both. I'm simply making sure it doesn't survive him." The judge looked at my father, then at me. "Mr. Beaumont, you built your empire on deceit. Your daughter built her courage on truth. The court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison." My father didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. As guards led him away, he turned once like he wanted to say something. Maybe an apology. Maybe another insult. I'd never know. I didn't need to. Outside, flashbulbs exploded like gunfire. Reporters shouted questions. "Stella, do you forgive him? Will you take over Beaumont Industries?" I stopped on the courthouse steps, wind tugging at my hair. "No," I said simply. "I'm not taking over his company." "What will you do then?" someone yelled. I looked past the cameras to the skyline, the same city he once ruled. "I'll rebuild what he destroyed, but not for his name." And for the first time in years, I felt lighter. The empire had fallen, but something else had risen, not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. He had created a daughter to mirror his pride. Instead, he forged his reckoning. The day my father went to prison, the sky over Manhattan was the clearest I'd ever seen. No smog, no storm clouds, just light, cold, and sharp, like the kind that follows a wildfire. Reporters still camped outside my building, but their voices had faded into background noise. The world had moved on to its next scandal. I hadn't. For months, I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because I was terrified of what came next. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by him. Not by being Charles Beaumont's daughter or his disappointment or his weapon. I was just me. Ava, Diana, and I met weekly in my new office, a rented loft with peeling paint and sunlight that spilled across old hardwood floors. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. We'd been approached by whistleblowers, small business owners, even retired teachers who'd been crushed by the same kind of corporate predation that had fueled my father's empire. That's how the Phoenix Initiative began, a non-profit dedicated to exposing financial abuse and rebuilding the lives of those destroyed by greed. We started small, a hotline, legal aid, partnerships, online transparency tools. Within 6 months, our work made national headlines. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had taught me how power worked, and now I was using his playbook to dismantle it. Eleanor, my grandmother, called sometimes, her voice softer now, age showing in pauses. Your father gets visitors, she told me once. He doesn't speak of you, but he reads every article with your name on it. I didn't ask what he felt. I didn't need to know because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. One evening, Ava and I walked past the old Beaumont Tower, the glass monument to my father's ego, now owned by a different conglomerate. The bronze plaque bearing his name had been removed, leaving faint, clean outlines in the metal where the letters once gleamed. Ava smirked. Think he ever imagined you'd erase him like that? I shook my head. He thought eraser was weakness. He never understood that. Sometimes destruction is how you start again. That night, I attended the Phoenix Foundation's first gala, a quiet, untelevised event filled not with billionaires, but with people who had survived financial ruin and rebuilt. When the applause began, I froze for a moment, the sound too familiar. It used to follow him. Now it surrounded me. I raised my glass. To every person who's ever been told they weren't enough, I said to every voice that was laughed at, silenced, dismissed. Sometimes the cruelest words become the spark that burns down everything false and clears space for something real. The room went still, and for a moment I saw flashes of that night years ago. The chandeliers, the laughter, the humiliation, but instead of pain, I felt pride. Afterward, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city glittered like a million second chances. I didn't own an empire anymore. I didn't need to. Behind me, Diana joined me with a smile. You know, she said, for someone who destroyed a billion-dollar dynasty, you're remarkably calm. I didn't destroy it, I said quietly. I just revealed what was already broken, she nodded. Then looked out over the skyline. So, what's next for you, Stella Beaumont? I smiled at the name the first time I'd heard it and didn't flinch. Next, I'm rewriting the legacy. The city lights reflected off the champagne in my glass, golden and restless. I thought about the girl who once stood in her father's ballroom, smiling through humiliation, trying to make him proud. She was gone. Now, not dead, but transformed. My father's empire had been built on lies. Mine would be built on light because some legacies burn so others can finally see.